Hi, I'm Cole. My father suspended me in front of the entire company, said I had to apologize to my brother. I didn't argue, I just said, all right. But when he smirked the next morning and asked if I'd learned my lesson, all he found was my desk. Empty. Badge gone. Resignation letter folded on top. What he didn't know was that I'd taken more than just my name with me. So tell me, when your own blood tries to erase you, how far would you go to remind them who really built the house they're standing in? Tuesday morning sunlight spilled over the steel and glass skyline of Austin, Texas. It was barely 9:00 a.m. when I pulled into the Maddox Systems parking lot. Same spot I'd parked in for the last 17 years. Same routine. I drank half my coffee in the car, always out of the same navy mug. Keep steady. That phrase used to mean something. These days, it was more like a dare. The front lobby doors whooshed open, and the cold air inside hit my face. I nodded to the receptionist. She smiled, like always. Polite, neutral, unaware the ground was about to shift under my feet. I headed straight for the boardroom on the top floor, elevator humming beneath my shoes, heart ticking like a slow metronome. My slides were ready, my numbers airtight. I was ready. When the elevator doors slid open, the whole floor already buzzed with movement. 70 staff, all summoned for what they thought was a year-end strategy session. I walked into the boardroom. Glass walls, long oak table, panoramic view of the city. And there they were, my father, Richard Maddox Sr., at the head of the table, and my older brother, Grayson, seated right beside him. Grayson didn't look at me, just leaned back with that smug half-smile he'd worn since we were kids. The seat I usually took, second from Dad's left, was already filled with someone from accounting. I stood for a second, just long enough for the silence to stretch, then slid into an empty chair further down. Cole, my father said, not looking up from his notepad. Go ahead. I stood and tapped the touchpad. The screen lit up with the opening slide. Next Gen Procurement Integration Phase 4 completion. I started walking them through it. Projected revenue impacts, vendor consolidation savings, next quarter's launch timeline. This project was my work, my long nights, my life really. And I wasn't asking for applause, just a chance to finish the sentence. But halfway through the third slide, Dad raised a hand. Cole, he said calmly, I think that's enough. I paused, confused. He turned toward the room, then back to me. You're suspended, my brain stuttered. Suspended? He nodded. Until you make a public apology to your brother. There it was. No warning, no explanation, just an execution. Silence flooded the room like a broken pipe. But it wasn't shock, not really. I scanned the faces. Marketing, HR, product, legal, none of them looked at me. They stared at the table, avoiding eye contact like it was radioactive. You'd think silence means they disagree. It doesn't. It means they agree. They just don't want to be seen doing it. I could have asked why. I could have defended myself, but I didn't. My throat was dry, but not tight. My hands were steady. I just said, all right. Then I sat down. Not even a ripple. Like the moment never happened. Grayson tapped the remote and picked up where I'd left off, my slides glowing behind him. I watched my own work come out of his mouth. He didn't even tweak the title. Not one word of credit. My name was erased like dry erase marker from a glass board. Clean, fast, permanent. I sat there for the next 30 minutes, listening to him take full ownership of what I had built. No one corrected him. Not even a glance in my direction. Every person in that room made a silent calculation. And I came out a liability. When the meeting finally adjourned, people shuffled out fast. No handshakes, no small talk. My father didn't even look my way. I stood and walked out, each step echoing too loud on the tile. As I passed the glass door, my own reflection stared back at me, but the sunlight fractured it into slices, like I'd been cut up and scattered into parts, and still I kept walking. Past the elevators, down the stairs, through the lobby, no dramatic exits, just one thought burning clean in my mind. If they can erase me in public once, they'll do it again. In my hand, I still held the mug, the one that said, "Keep steady." It was the only thing I didn't leave behind. The next morning, I arrived early, too early. Maybe I didn't want to face the stairs at the usual hour. Maybe I needed time to think. Whatever the reason, the hallways were still quiet, lights humming low as I walked toward the glass room. I set the mug on the table, right in front of the chair I'd sat in for almost 2 decades. I turned it so the words faced me. Keep steady. The glass walls caught the cold sunlight from Dallas and scattered it across every surface, sharp, sterile, precise. People began filing in, one by one, like they were stepping onto a game board, careful not to land on the wrong square. Behind me, the hum of remote connections came to life. Wall screens blinked on, filling with grids of faces from satellite offices, Houston, Denver, Minneapolis. I kept my eyes on the center seat. My father sat down without a glance in my direction. Grayson strolled in a few seconds later, dropped into his chair like he owned the building and the air inside it. He didn't look tired. He looked rehearsed. The agenda slide flashed up. Q1 transition strategy. My deck, modified just enough to make it look like someone else had authored it. I folded my hands on the table. Then my father cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, voice level, "there's one item of business." He didn't look at me. He looked through me. Cole Maddox is suspended until he offers a public apology to his brother. No build-up, no background, just that. The microphones picked up every syllable and fed it to every corner of the company. Online, faces stopped blinking. In the room, a couple of hands froze mid-air above keyboards. Someone coughed behind me, too loud, and then silence again. A heavy, loaded silence. I didn't move. My first instinct was to explain, walk them through the budget discrepancies, the override logs, the timestamps that didn't match. But I didn't. I caught a flicker of a smile curling at the edge of Grayson's mouth. It wasn't gloating. It was worse. It was planned. For a second, I thought of my mother's handwriting, a birthday card she sent me in college. One line stuck, "Be steady, even when it's personal." So I nodded once. All right. That was it. No scene, no outburst, just the sound of everything shifting beneath me. Online chat bubbles appeared and disappeared, like people wanted to say something but thought better of it. One junior analyst sitting across from me looked down at her notepad like it had answers she hadn't studied for. A man from legal reached for his pen, missed it, and left it on the floor. Grayson didn't hesitate. He slid forward, took the clicker from the center of the table, and switched the slide. My slide. The title still had my structure. The colors, fonts, mine. But now it had his voice. "Let's keep moving," my father said, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just been erased in real time. Grayson began talking about the new operational approach and how fresh leadership would help integrate innovation across departments. I didn't hear the words. I watched his fingers tap through the sequence I had designed. Each graph, each model, a piece of my time, renamed, reshaped, reassigned. The room nodded, like rooms always do when someone in power is talking and they want to be remembered as agreeable. No one spoke for me. I didn't expect them to. People don't risk heat for a man already being burned. What surprised me wasn't the silence. It was the clarity. I wasn't afraid of losing a title. I was just tired of renting out my name to people who never paid attention to the lease. I'd spent years building under their roof, thinking effort would earn equity. I glanced at the mug, still facing me, still steady. I pressed my palm flat on the table, feeling the hum of the HVAC system. Steady, indifferent, predictable. Like policy, like hierarchy, like family sometimes. The meeting ended with a collective shuffle. Chairs moved, jackets were grabbed. Eyes carefully didn't meet mine. I didn't grab a folder. I didn't take my laptop. Just the mug. I walked out. Outside the glassroom, the corridors were wider than I remembered. The window at the far end showed Dallas traffic, inching along like blood that refused to clot. Normalcy never looked so surgical. They made it public. I made it simple. At the elevator, I pressed the button. My reflection stared back at me, sliced by the chrome lines on the door. Somewhere behind me, I heard the microphones powering down. The last line still rang out in my memory. "You're suspended. Apologize." No. No more apologies for being competent, for being quiet, for being inconvenient to the wrong kind of people. The elevator light blinked. And then, "Learned your lesson yet?" Grayson's voice, right behind me. The words floated down the hallway before I even turned around. Grayson stood there, tie loose, sleeves rolled, confidence wrapped around him like armor. That same smirk he wore since we were kids was now carved into his face. The kind of smirk that came from someone who'd never had to clean up his own mess, someone who thought consequence was something that happened to other people. He stepped closer, shoes clicking on the marble. "You've got that look again, Cole. The 'I'm above this' stare. You should really learn to read a room. People don't like martyrs." I let him talk. I'd learned a long time ago that silence unsettles bullies more than anger ever could. He mistook my quiet for surrender, and that suited me fine. "Come on," he added, lowering his voice. "You can fix this. Just say the words." "I'm sorry, Grayson. Dad will reinstate you by Monday. You'll keep your pension, your parking spot, your dignity." I finally turned to face him. "You think dignity is something you can hand back?" He laughed, a low, smug sound that echoed against the glass walls. "Always the philosopher. You know what your problem is, Cole? You still believe merit means something here." "Maybe it doesn't," I said softly, "but integrity still does, at least to me." For a second, his jaw tightened. Then the smirk came back, like reflex. "Suit yourself." He walked away, slow and confident, as if he'd won something. Maybe he thought he had. I stood there until the hallway emptied out, then made my way to my office. The door opened to stillness. No hum from the desktop, no stacks of reports waiting for review. Morning light stretched across the floor and stopped at the edge of my desk. Everything was gone. No files, no pens, no laptop. Just the mug. "Keep steady." The words faced the window now, not me. Someone from IT had already come through. Secured the workstation, as they liked to phrase it, like I was a breach instead of the man who built the systems they were trying to lock me out of. A white envelope sat neatly on my chair. Property review. Inside, a printed checklist of company-issued items, my temporary deactivation notice, and a yellow sticky note with a scrawled line. "Sorry about this, Cole. Orders from upstairs. I smiled, not from humor, but from clarity. I folded the letter once, slipped it back under the mug, and looked around the room. For 19 years, this had been my second home. Long nights, bad coffee, endless audits. I'd sacrificed weekends and anniversaries here. Now it looked like a stranger's office. That chair, the same one I'd sat in through every crisis, used to feel like stability. Now it just looked like a cage I'd mistaken for comfort. Comfort, I realized, is the softest kind of trap. I stood there, breathing slow. Every sound in that room felt amplified. The hum of the vent, the faint buzz from the ceiling light, the distant murmur of voices outside. "You built this place," that voice in my head whispered, "but you don't own it." And that was the truth. I didn't. Not anymore. I gathered nothing. Not a paperclip, not a memory. The mug stayed, a silent witness. Then I opened the top drawer and placed a single page on the desk. My resignation letter. Unaddressed, unsigned. Just one clean sentence above the blank space. Final review complete. All systems reconciled. To anyone else, it would look like a routine compliance line. To me, it was a signal, a quiet declaration. The systems Grayson was bragging about in every meeting, the ones he called his innovation, were built on my architecture, my clauses, my conditional access. They worked because I let them. When I walked out, I didn't lock the door. The hallway stretched long and empty. I could hear footsteps from the other end, people returning to normal, pretending nothing happened. Grayson's laughter drifted faintly through the air somewhere down the corridor. It wasn't loud, just enough for people to know he'd won. But laughter like that doesn't last. It feeds on the illusion of power, and illusions are temporary by design. I didn't look back. Some exits don't need noise, they need precision. I pressed the elevator button and waited. As the doors slid open, I caught my reflection again, not fractured this time, but clear, lighter. Then a thought came, sharp and certain. They think this is over. I didn't step into the elevator right away. That one thought, they think this is over, stretched out like a quiet road in my mind. I let it settle. Then I stepped in, pressed G, and let the chrome doors seal shut behind me. I didn't go home immediately. I drove around the Beltway twice with no destination, just letting the silence in the car surround me like armor. No music, no calls. The city kept pulsing around me. Neon lights, brake lights, people chasing Friday night drinks. But I kept to the slow lane. By the time I pulled into my driveway, it was almost 9. The lights were on. Porch light, too. Mara always left it for me, even if she didn't know when I was coming home. Or if I was. She was in the den when I walked in, curled on the couch with her legs tucked beneath her, reading. She looked up and gave me a small nod. That was it. No, how was your day? No probing. We had passed that point years ago, not from distance, but understanding. I poured myself a coffee, the old chipped mug with the hairline cracked down the side. The keep steady one had done its time. I took it to the home office. The room was quiet, lit only by the screen of my old monitor warming to life. The desk smelled faintly of dry paper and ink toner, comforting in a way the boardroom never had. I slid the USB from my wallet into the port. The files blinked open. Folders, archives, spreadsheets going back 15 years. Invoices, patent filings, deployment chains, partner contracts. Every trail led to one name, mine. Or at least, it used to. I opened the most recent filing, then another, and another. The author metadata had changed, not just removed, overwritten. Grayson Maddox. He didn't even bother to change the font. I scrolled through revision histories. Timestamps confirmed the edits. Quietly, gradually, over 6 months, they'd scrubbed me out of my own legacy. There was no accidental oversight here. This was methodical. A slow erasure disguised as policy updates. I clicked into the IP registration logs. My code signatures. Gone from the header files. Swapped. Masked. I leaned back, eyes stinging from the screen glow. The resignation letter sat saved in the documents folder, identical to the printed copy I left behind. But here, I'd embedded every metadata fingerprint, timestamps, admin overrides, audit logs. I had tracked it all. Every change, every deletion. They'd taught me to be precise, and I had listened better than they ever knew. I took a sip of coffee. Still hot. Still bitter. The betrayal didn't sting anymore. Not like it used to. I had expected it. Maybe not this bold, this coordinated, but the root of it had always been there. My father had a saying, "Family first means we deal in-house." What he meant was, family is the excuse you use to keep secrets safe. I remembered being 17, watching him bury a partner's contribution under a shell company. The man never recovered. My father said, "He overstepped?" I asked, "Wasn't he right, though?" Dad looked at me like I had missed the point. He wasn't in charge. Loyalty wasn't about truth. It was about control. And I had stayed loyal. Longer than most. The phone buzzed beside me. Unknown number. Just a text. "Check your inbox. You didn't get this from me." I didn't pause. I opened the email on my laptop, running it through a sandbox first. Subject, Succession Adjustment Plans. 2 weeks ago. Grayson Maddox to assume interim leadership, pending Cole Maddox's disciplinary action. Beneath it, timeline to be accelerated depending on response. They hadn't reacted to anything I did. This was planned. My suspension was the rollout phase. The clarity of it all was sobering. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. That had passed in the elevator. What I felt now was something colder. Not revenge, not spite. Just a resolve. Tight and sharp. I hit print. The memo fed out of the tray slowly, quietly. I folded it once, slid it into a file labeled Audit 21, and tucked it away. Then I opened a new email draft and typed, Phase 1 complete. Sent it to myself. The cursor blinked a few seconds before I closed the lid. I sat back, finishing the last sip of coffee, and stared out the window. In the distance, the streetlights flickered like old secrets, trying to stay lit. They thought they'd buried me, but they forgot I wrote the blueprint. She spotted me the second I walked through the glass doors. The name tag pinned to her collar read Darla, but her eyes said she already knew who I was. She stood, brushed invisible lint off her blazer, and smiled. That tight, polite kind of smile people save for funerals and financial corrections. "Mr. Maddox," she said, gesturing toward a small meeting room off the lobby. "We weren't expecting you this morning." I stepped in, laid the folder down on the desk between us, and sat across from her. "I'm not here to make a deposit," I said. "Just an adjustment." She opened the folder slowly, like she was afraid something might explode from it. Inside were the documents, 3 transfer authorizations, all notarized. The joint ownership form from 2011 was still crisp, the ink unbroken. She paused when she reached it. "You're removing authorization?" "Just mine," I said. "From anything connected to Maddox Systems. Every asset tied to that umbrella." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. "Are you certain, sir? Once it's processed, reversals aren't simple." I nodded once. "I'm certain. I built the machine. Let's see how it hums without me in the circuit." She didn't press further, just typed. And with each keystroke, a wall came down behind me. Not with a crash, but with the quiet decisiveness of a man who has nothing left to prove. 10 minutes later, it was done. All that remained were digital ripples, electronic locks clicking shut in the background of a system built to hide its dependents. And I knew the claws would fire soon. 15 years ago, buried in the internal architecture of Maddox Systems' finance infrastructure, I'd written a protocol clause that required dual verification on all proprietary accounts, one of them being mine. A security safeguard, originally. One that no one ever challenged because it was buried deep under a layer of legacy code and vague compliance language. With my withdrawal, that clause kicked in automatically. It wouldn't send sparks or sirens. It would just stop. Stop everything. Frozen liquidity. Transaction flags. System alerts too complex for anyone in that building to override without triggering a third-party audit. Not revenge, just architecture. At exactly 11:42 a.m., the Maddox Systems accounts began locking themselves out. I didn't linger in the bank. I left Darla with a thank you and stepped into the sunlight outside. Bright, sharp against the concrete. The building across the street loomed in glass and steel, like a showroom pretending to be a company. Instead of getting back in the car, I crossed the street to a diner I remembered from my college days. Same neon sign, same grease-smeared windows. Inside, the booths were half full with regulars, men in work boots, retirees with crossword puzzles, waitresses who didn't have time for small talk. I slid into a booth in the back, ordered black coffee. The TV on the far wall flashed business news. No sound, but the stock ticker crawled across the bottom. Red, red, more red. A headline flashed briefly. Maddox Systems. Delayed filings. Disrupt forecast. The waitress poured the coffee. She was maybe 40, tired but kind-eyed. She noticed the suit. "You with the company?" she asked, tipping her chin toward the Maddox building. I stirred the coffee once. "Not anymore." She chuckled, soft and knowing. "My brother used to work there. Said they eat their own." I didn't smile, but I looked her in the eye and said, "Yeah, they do." She nodded like she'd seen that story 100 times, refilled the mug, and left me alone. I sipped slowly. The warmth grounded me. No texts from Mara. No calls from my father. Not yet. They'd be coming. But for now, there was quiet. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. Just before noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I picked up. "Yeah. Cole," a voice said. I recognized it. Thomas Yates, the company's lead counsel. His voice was tight, bordering on panic. "You need to come in," he said. "Why?" He hesitated. "Your father just found out." I stayed silent. Thomas continued. "About the accounts. He thinks you made it public." Across the diner window, the Maddox logo reflected in the bank's polished exterior, fractured in the sunlight, like glass half shattered. "I didn't," I said. "Then why?" "Because I don't need to. Not yet." He didn't respond right away. I ended the call without waiting. I finished my coffee, dropped a 20 under the mug, slid out of the booth, let the bell above the door chime behind me. Back outside, the air felt different, sharper, cleaner. I didn't look back at the building. The ones built on borrowed brilliance never lasted long under real weather. They thought removing me would fix the optics, but they forgot I designed the plumbing. By the time I pulled into the neighborhood, the sun had dropped low enough to cast long shadows over the asphalt. My father's car was already there, parked crooked across the edge of the driveway, engine still running, heat lifting off the hood like the last breath before a storm. I didn't need to guess how long he'd been sitting there, replaying headlines in his head, grinding his teeth down to the root. He didn't wait for me to get out of the car. The moment my tires stopped, the driver's side door on his sedan flung open, and he stormed toward the front porch like he owned it. He didn't knock. The door swung wide as I stepped inside, and he followed, shoulders stiff, jaw locked. The kind of entrance you don't ask for. The kind that comes with decades of entitlement. "Are you out of your mind?" he snapped, voice booming through the house before his shoes even cleared the doormat. I didn't answer right away. I took my time setting the keys on the side table, slipping off my jacket. I heard the door close behind him with a sharp thud. "I don't remember inviting you in," I said, calm, measured. "Do you even realize what you've done?" he barked, stepping deeper into the living room like he had something to prove. "The bank's frozen operations. Vendors are calling in threats. Payrolls in chaos. You sabotaged your own damn family." That word again. Family. He used it like a weapon. Every time he felt cornered, every time someone refused to fall in line. Not a bond, just a leash he tugged when control started slipping. I didn't give him the rise he wanted. I didn't sabotage anything. I followed protocol. "You embarrassed me," he said, voice shaking with rage. "In front of the entire board." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't embarrass you. You did that when you read my suspension like a press release." He took a step forward, pointing a finger at my chest. "You humiliated your brother. You've always hated him for being what you're not." I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Jealous? Of Grayson? Of what? Skating by on favors? Hijacking systems I built and claiming them as his? That's not success. That's camouflage. He looked like he wanted to swing at me, just for a second, but instead, he bit down on his fury and said, "You think this little stunt earns you some kind of moral high ground? You'll crawl back when the money dries up. You always do." I stepped in, just close enough for my voice to cut through. "The difference between us," I said, "is when I walk away from something, it doesn't fall apart because I need it. It falls apart because it needed me." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. That silence, it landed harder than any insult I could have crafted. He turned his back, pacing toward the fireplace, his hands curled into fists. "You've always been difficult. Always had to have the last word. Always needed control." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. "No," I said, softer. "You did, and you mistook silence for loyalty. I kept quiet all these years not because I agreed, but because I respected the house you built. I see now it was never a house, just a stage." He froze. The fire in him flickered, just for a breath. For the first time, I didn't see the patriarch of Maddox systems. I saw a man who had learned how to command rooms, but never learned how to hold people. He recovered quickly, straightened his collar, composed his mask. "You think walking away protects you?" His tone dropped, icy. "You sign things. There are clauses. I can bring them to light. You want this messy? I'll make it messy." I tilted my head slightly. "So can I." I reached into my inner pocket and set a small flash drive on the coffee table between us. The plastic clicked against the wood like a trigger. His gaze dropped to it. No flinch, no denial, but I saw it. That flicker of calculation. "There's enough data on there," I said, "to make every board member question who's really been fudging the quarterly reports. And every investor wonder why there's no audit trail on Grayson's last 4 proposals." "You wouldn't," he said after a pause. There was no shock in his voice, only challenge. I looked him dead in the eye. Wouldn't I? He didn't speak again, just turned toward the front door, stepped slower this time. He didn't slam it. He didn't look back, just opened it, stepped outside, and left. The engine groaned as he pulled away, and I stood there, in the center of the room, not moving until the sound of his car had vanished completely down the block. The house settled again. I walked to the window, the light now dimming over the driveway, gold spilling across the concrete like a closing curtain. No one wins in a house like this. There's just the one who leaves standing. Grayson's voice trembled at the edges like he was trying to steady a cup with cracked hands. "You shouldn't have done that, Cole," he said. "You don't know what he's planning." I stepped into the hallway, away from the kitchen where Mara was folding laundry. I kept my voice low. "What is he planning?" Static filled the line for a second, then, "He's going to make it look like you stole from the company. He's got the accounting team pulling archived trails, digital approvals, stuff they can backdate. Tomorrow morning there's a board meeting. He's going to frame you before anyone checks the facts." I leaned my shoulder against the wall, eyes fixed on nothing. "And you're just letting him do it?" He hesitated. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The line went dead a second later. He hung up first. Sleep didn't come. I didn't even try. I stayed at the kitchen table, the screen of my laptop glowing in the dark, humming like it knew something was coming. Mara came out once, rubbed my shoulder, didn't ask questions. That kind of quiet had taken years to build, and tonight it carried me. I sifted through emails, contract drafts, timestamp diagrams, proofs of authorship, early blueprints, every back-end code system I had contributed to. My fingerprints were all over Maddox systems. Too many to wipe, too deep to replace. They wanted to control the story, but I'd learned from him, whoever speaks first controls the room. By morning, the kitchen light had begun to dim with the rising sun. I showered, put on a navy blazer, not to impress, but to look deliberate, and got in the car. At 9:01 a.m., I walked through the revolving doors of Maddox Systems. The receptionist's fingers paused mid-keystroke. "Mr. Maddox, you're not—" "I know," I said, nodding at the hallway. "Call security if you want. They'll want to hear this too." The conference room was full. The board members, some familiar faces from my early years, looked up in slow disbelief. My father was already seated at the head of the table, crisp suit, legs crossed, hands folded like this was another quarterly review. Grayson sat to his right, not meeting my eyes. "Well," my father said with that rehearsed smirk, "decided to face the consequences after all?" I didn't bother answering. I walked to the table, pulled a flash drive from my pocket, and plugged it into the monitor at the center. I thought I'd bring the receipts. The screen lit up. First, transaction logs. Lines of numbers with usernames and IP addresses clearly listed. Then came time-stamped software access histories. Then archived emails, edits, deletions, and one internal thread marked draft only, do not forward, showing Grayson attaching altered accounting files. A hush fell over the room. The company lawyer, Thomas Yates, grew pale, jaw twitching. One board member leaned forward, squinting at the screen like he didn't trust his own glasses. Grayson's lips moved, but no sound came out. He looked like a child caught with scissors in his hand, standing over shredded curtains. "Every document you plan to use against me," I said quietly, "was edited on your personal machine, Grayson, logged in through your VPN, tracked under your admin timestamp. My father's smirk slipped, just a little. You set us up, he said, his voice tightening. No, I replied. You set yourself up. I just stopped covering for you. No one spoke. You could feel the collapse in the room, the silence that follows when a myth dies. They always thought I stayed because I needed them. But I'd stayed because I wanted to build something that outlasted us. I unplugged the drive, pocketed it. Clean your house, Dad, I said, before someone else does it for you. Then I turned and walked out. The sunlight outside hit harder than I expected. Cold, but clean. Like air after lightning. My shoes clicked against the stone walkway, the echo sharp and measured. Back in the car, I didn't drive right away. I just sat there, watching the reflection of the building on my windshield. It looked solid from the outside, glass and steel, ambition and pride. But I knew the rot was inside. And I just lit a fuse. By the time I got home, the porch light was already on. Mara must have turned it on when the sky started dimming, unaware the whole city was already lit up by my family's mess. The house was quiet. I didn't even make it past the hallway before the first call came in, then another, and another. I glanced at the screen. Unknown numbers, news desks, former clients, names I hadn't seen since college, all chasing the same thing. The headline was everywhere. Maddox Systems under federal investigation for fraudulent accounting practices. I sank onto the couch, phone face down on the coffee table. The fabric under me felt foreign, like I didn't belong to this house anymore, like my name had grown too loud to fit inside it. The television stayed off. I didn't need to see it to know what was playing. Underneath the rising chatter in my head, there was a different kind of noise. One I didn't expect. Grayson. Somewhere in the mix of justice and wreckage, the image of him, pale, nervous, hiding behind Dad in every boardroom, surfaced. For all his entitlement, he wasn't built for this kind of scrutiny. I didn't pity him, but for the first time, I didn't hate him either. At 11:04 p.m., headlights sliced across the front window. I peeked through the curtain before unlocking the door. He stood there, drenched, suit clinging to him like regret. His shoes left wet prints on the welcome mat. When I opened the door, he didn't step forward. "You ruined me," he said. I didn't flinch. "I didn't. You just ran out of places to hide." His chest rose, fell, then stuttered again. He stepped inside without asking. I closed the door behind him. He looked around the living room like it was foreign territory. It wasn't big, but it was honest. No gold frames, no inherited paintings, just books, coffee stains, and one photograph of Mara and me from when the world made more sense. "Dad won't take my calls," he muttered. "The board's cutting me out. You win." I almost laughed. "That's what this is to you? A game?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched. Water dripped from his sleeves onto the hardwood. "This wasn't about winning, Grayson," I said, stepping past him to grab a towel. I tossed it onto the armrest. "It was about ending the cycle." He scoffed. "You always thought you were better than him." I looked at him, not the tailored suit or the panicked eyes, but him. The little boy who once followed me around the backyard with a plastic briefcase and a mouthful of Dad's business slogans. "No," I said. "It just means I'm done." He left 5 minutes later. No goodbye. Just wet footprints across the floor and a door that closed quieter than I expected. The next morning came like a second wave. By the time I made coffee, my inbox was full again. But this time, it wasn't messages. It was links. Maddox Systems, live press conference, 9:00 a.m. CST, I clicked 1. My father stood behind a podium, flanked by the company's legal and PR heads. The company logo beamed behind him like a stamp of confidence. His tie was blue, the same shade he wore to every major acquisition. He began as expected. We've always been a company built on trust, on transparency. His voice was even, firm. The camera didn't blink, neither did he. Until the screen behind him suddenly flickered, the logo faded, and then it was replaced, slide by slide, with internal emails, time-stamped signatures, and digital receipts, approvals, backdated edits, transfer logs, all pointing to him. Someone had leaked the rest, not me. Grayson. He had done it, the one thing no one thought he could. He told the truth, even if it burned what was left of his standing to the ground. The press gasped. Someone dropped a pen. My father froze. For the first time in my life, I saw him stumble. Not physically, emotionally. The words stopped coming. His mouth moved, but his voice didn't follow. The PR team scrambled to black the screen, but the damage was done. Even with no sound, his face said everything. The empire he built wasn't crumbling because of me. It was collapsing under its own weight. That afternoon, I didn't go online. I didn't answer calls. I didn't return messages. I walked to the park near the house, the same path I used to take when I was younger, back when I thought the world was smaller and fairer. The rain had stopped, but the air still held the scent of earth and endings. A kid passed me on a scooter. A couple walked their dog, laughing about something too small to matter to anyone else. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't strategizing. I wasn't reliving old conversations in my head, wondering what I should have said. I was just still, free. A week had passed before the letter came. No return address, no seal. Just my name written in the same sharp, deliberate handwriting I'd seen 1,000 times across contracts, audits, and reprimands. Inside was his old watch, gold-plated, edges worn thin where the metal had rubbed against years of cufflinks and boardroom tables. And a note. It was never supposed to be this way. That was all it said. No greeting, no apology, no explanation. But I didn't need one. I turned the watch over in my hand. The back was engraved with the Maddox logo, the same emblem that had once hung on every glass wall of the company. His empire, his pride, his mirror. The tick was soft, faint, but steady. Somehow still alive. The same couldn't be said for the man who'd worn it. I set it on my desk beside the unopened bills and a half-empty cup of coffee. For a long moment, I just watched the second hand move, each click echoing like a question that no one was left to answer. He'd never admit it outright, but that note, that was his version of confession. For Richard Maddox Sr., that was as close as he could come to saying, "I'm sorry." And maybe that was enough. 2 days later, I drove out to the cemetery on the outskirts of Dallas. The morning was cool, the sky heavy with a kind of quiet that didn't ask for words. The road wound past fields that had turned gold with late autumn, and for the first time in years, I didn't think about meetings, deadlines, or shareholders. Just distance, just breath. His grave wasn't marked yet, only a temporary nameplate at the head of the fresh earth. Richard Maddox, 1950-2025. A simple dash between the years, a life condensed to punctuation. I stood there a while, not knowing what to say, not angry anymore, not proud either, just tired. Then I took the watch from my pocket and set it beside the marker. The sunlight caught the face just long enough to glint once, like acknowledgement. And I realized, as it rested there, ticking quietly against the stone, that it was never about control. Not really. It was about approval. Every decision I'd made, every late night, every silent compromise, I'd done to earn a nod that never came. He'd built an empire to prove he was unstoppable. I'd built systems to prove I was indispensable. Same cycle, different tools. And maybe, standing there in the chill air, that was what I was finally breaking. I didn't stay long. When the clouds began to roll in, I turned back toward the car, the air heavy with the scent of rain and pine. On the drive home, I rolled down the window. The wind caught the edge of the empty envelope on the passenger seat and sent it fluttering to the floor. I left it there. By the time I got back, the house felt different. Not lighter, but quieter. I walked into the home office, the same room that had once been filled with late-night arguments, reports, and echoes of a name that no longer needed. Defending. On the desk sat my laptop. I opened it, and a blank page greeted me. Waiting. At the top, I typed, Maddox Innovations. It wasn't grand. It wasn't a monument. It was just something that was mine. I stared at the title for a while, letting it breathe on the screen. For years, I thought inheritance meant taking what was left behind, money, assets, legacy. But maybe real inheritance was learning what not to carry forward. I had his precision, his stubbornness, his discipline. But I didn't have to have his pride. Evening came gently. I made coffee. Not the strong kind I used to drink at the office, just plain black from an old tin. The chipped mug I'd brought home months ago sat waiting. Keep steady, it read. The words faded, but still legible. I smiled. For the first time, the bitterness in the cup didn't linger. I leaned back, watched the sun dip below the fence line, and whispered to no one. All right. The same word I'd used the day he tried to break me. Only this time, it wasn't surrender. It was peace. From the next room, the gold watch ticked softly. Not counting down anymore, just keeping time.